What would you steal to save a life? For Barron Trump, that question wasn't hypothetical. On a snowy Christmas Eve in 2025, the new president's son made a choice that would shock the nation and prove that heroes come from the most unexpected places. The snow fell in thick, silent flakes over the sleepy town of Rhinebeck, New York, turning its cobblestone streets into a ghostly canvas. Christmas lights twinkled through frosted windows, casting multicolored shadows on the untouched snow. Inside warm homes, families gathered around fireplaces, sharing hot cocoa and stories. But in this picture-perfect scene, two figures moved with desperate purpose through the gathering storm. Barron Trump, his tall frame hunched against the biting wind, kept to the shadows of historic buildings. His face was hidden under a black beanie and a scarf pulled up to his nose, but his eyes, sharp and determined like his father's, scanned their surroundings constantly. Beside him walked Jake Martinez, a lanky teenager whose threadbare jacket and worn sneakers spoke of harder times. Every few steps, Jake would glance at Barron, as if still unable to believe that the son of a new president was really there, really helping him. "You're sure they'll have it?" Jake whispered, his voice cracking. His hands, red from the cold, trembled as he shoved them deeper into his pockets. The weight of what they were about to do pressed down on him like the heavy snow clouds above. Barron nodded, his gloved hand tightening around a crumpled list. Inhalers, antibiotics, painkillers. The words were scribbled in a child's shaky handwriting. Jake's 10-year-old sister Lila had severe asthma, and this winter had been particularly cruel. Her last attack had left her lips blue, gasping for air on their threadbare couch while Jake held her hand, feeling more helpless than any 17-year-old brother should. The 24-hour pharmacy stood like a beacon in the night, its fluorescent lights harsh against the soft darkness. But the security camera above the entrance loomed like a silent sentinel, its red light blinking steadily, a warning they both chose to ignore. Inside, the store was eerily quiet. The only sounds were the gentle hum of refrigerators and the soft classical music playing through overhead speakers. The cashier, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses and a cardigan that had seen better days, sat behind the counter, completely absorbed in his crossword puzzle. Jake's sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as they moved through the aisles. Each sound made him wince, but Barron remained steady, methodically gathering the items on their list. His hands didn't shake as he picked up an inhaler, then another. His movements were precise, practiced, as if he'd rehearsed this moment in his mind 100 times. 6 letters, the cashier muttered to himself. Word for moral responsibility. Barron paused, the word ethics floating through his mind, but he pushed the thought away. Now wasn't the time for crossword puzzles or moral philosophy. The theft itself took exactly 90 seconds. Barron had timed it perfectly, knowing the blind spots of the security cameras, understanding that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing weren't always the same. But as they turned to leave, fate had other plans. A gust of wind from the opening door caught Barron's scarf, pulling it down just as the cashier looked up from his puzzle. Their eyes met, and in that frozen moment recognition dawned on the old man's face. You're him," the man stammered, pointing a weathered finger. "You're Barron Trump." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake, panic overtaking him, bolted into the night, leaving Barron alone under the harsh fluorescent lights. The stolen medicines felt like lead in his pockets. The cashier didn't reach for the phone to call the police. Instead, with trembling hands, he pulled out his smartphone and pressed record. By sunrise, the video. Barron Trump caught stealing. had already reached 10 million views. The media circus that followed was predictably fierce. Cable news. Talking heads took turns dissecting every frame of the footage. Pundits sneered about privilege and entitlement, their voices dripping with barely concealed glee. Like father, like son, they proclaimed, happy to have found another Trump scandal to feast upon. Twitter erupted with hashtags, "Sheer Barron busted," "Sheuk Trump crime," "Sheer privileged thief." Late-night hosts had a field day, their jokes ranging from mild jabs to cruel speculation about Trump genes. Even former White House staffers hiding behind the shield of anonymity couldn't resist adding their commentary. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? Through it all, Barron remained silent. No statements, no tweets, no explanations. His silence only fueled the speculation, with body language experts analyzing security footage frame by frame, claiming to read guilt, arrogance, or defiance in every movement. But in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, the story was very different. Jake Martinez sat on the edge of his sister's bed, watching her labored breathing with tears in his eyes. The new inhaler, the one Barron had stolen, sat on her nightstand, already making a difference. On the ancient TV in the corner, pundits continued their relentless analysis of the Trump heir's criminal turn. "We have to tell them," Jake whispered, stroking Lila's hair as she slept peacefully. "For the first time in weeks, they're destroying him, and he saved you. He saved us." "They'll never believe us," Lila wheezed, her eyes fluttering open. "Who believes kids like us?" The truth, as always, was more complicated than any headline could capture. 2 weeks before, the pharmacy incident, Barron had been wandering through Central Park, having slipped away from his Secret Service detail, something he'd gotten surprisingly good at over the years. The golden afternoon light had painted everything in warm hues, making even the graffiti on the benches look almost artistic. That's when he'd first seen Jake, backed against a tree by a hulking man in a leather jacket. The man's voice had carried, "Cross the quiet path. You owe me $500, your sister pays if you don't." His meaty hand had been wrapped around Jake's collar, lifting the teenager onto his tiptoes. Barron had intervened without thinking, throwing cash at the dealer, all he had in his wallet. It had bought Jake 14 days, nothing more. But it was enough time for Jake to tell his story. Parents killed in a car crash 2 years ago. Insurance that barely covered the funeral, a sister with severe asthma, and medical bills that kept piling up. "He'll kill her," Jake had confessed that day, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on his face. "Lila's all I have. She's all I've ever had." Barron, who knew something about isolation despite his privileged upbringing, made his choice that day. Some would call it the wrong choice. Others would call it the only choice. As the scandal raged on, an anonymous email arrived at every major news outlet. Attached was security footage from the pharmacy's back alley, time-stamped 10 minutes before the theft. The video quality was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear, Jake's voice desperate and breaking. "They'll hurt her if I don't pay tonight. Please. I've got nowhere else to go." And Barron's reply, quiet but firm, "Meet me at Rhinebeck and don't tell a soul." The clip ended with Jake running away, sobbing, while Barron stood in the snow, already formulating his plan. 3 days after the video leaked, Barron Trump stood before a sea of cameras at Trump Tower. His father's advisors had begged him to deny everything, to claim the video was fake news. Instead, he stepped up to the microphone, his face pale but resolute, his voice steady and clear. "I broke the law," he began, the words cutting through the click and whir of cameras. But I'd do it again. Over the next 20 minutes he laid out the whole story. Lila's condition, the drug dealer's threats, the $25,000 in unpaid hospital bills Jake's parents left behind. He spoke about choices and consequences, about the gap between law and justice. When he held up Lila's crayon drawing, a stick figure family under the words, "Thank you, Barron," she'd misspelled his name. Hardened reporters found themselves wiping away tears. "We judge people by the worst thing they've ever done," he said, his voice growing stronger. "But we never ask why they did it. Maybe it's time we started." The fallout was swift and unexpected. The drug dealer was arrested within hours thanks to anonymous tips Barron had provided to the FBI. Jake and Lila were relocated to a safe house, their medical bills mysteriously paid by an unnamed donor. On social media, "Who Would You Save" began trending, filled with stories of moral dilemmas and impossible choices. But not everyone was pleased. At Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump raged about weakness and bad optics, while Melania pulled her son aside, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and pride. "You should have told me," she said softly, her accent thicker with emotion. "Would you have listened?" Barron replied, not unkindly. "Really listened." A week later, Barron stood outside Jake and Lila's new apartment building. Through the window he could see them dancing, Jake spinning his sister around while she laughed, her breathing strong and clear for the first time in months. He left a duffel bag full of groceries on their doorstep and walked away, snow crunching, under his boots. In his pocket was a note from Lila, decorated with stickers and glitter. "You're my hero." But as the headlines shifted to the next scandal, as they always do, Barron understood something his father never had. True heroes don't seek the spotlight. They don't need their names in gold on buildings or their faces on magazine covers. Sometimes being a hero means simply doing what's right, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is break the rules to save a stranger. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. But what rules are worth breaking? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will make you think.